Thanks for tuning in. I'm Joel Amadon.
And I'm Ann Monroe.
And this is The Teacher's Journey, Mile Markers on the Road to Better Teaching, a podcast series where we discuss stories of teacher development.
This podcast is brought to you by the University of Mississippi School of Education and is an Amadon Planet production.
Here we go. We have a very special guest today, Austyn Jones. Now, Austyn, you have been a part of my class, and have you had Dr. Monroe in class?
Yes, the very first semester of our freshman year.
Whoa! So,
Yeah.
like, first few days of class, like of your time at the University of Mississippi, you were in Dr. Monroe's class?
Right. Actually, I think even before that, maybe you were part of the retreat, Dr. Monroe. So even before the first day of class.
That's correct. And I actually remember Austyn's interview for METP. I remember he was wearing a bow tie.
Oh,
And I believe he was like under a stairwell somewhere, like for the you were somewhere, like it looked like you were like maybe you were at school and you're trying to get a quiet place. I can't remember exactly, but I do remember, I believe you were wearing a bow tie. Am I right?
I actually don't remember. That was a long time ago. But I do remember I was at home, though. I was at home.
Okay. Well, then maybe you weren't hiding under a staircase.
Maybe I was.
But you had a bow tie on. I do remember that.
All right. Yeah.
It was a really good interview.
so Austyn Jones is Harry Potter. That's what we want to say. Lives in the stairs. Oh, your aunt and uncle are so mean. And sorry about your cousin.
Yeah.
No, Austyn Jones, METP fellow. And so we can put a link in. So that's Mississippi Excellence in Teaching Project. And we'll put some information in the show notes if people want to learn more about that program. It's outstanding. Because already some people are like, whoa, you get to interact with professors even before you step on campus and you're from freshman year on. Yeah, there's some amazing things happening with METP. So if you want to check that out, again, we'll put a link in the show notes. But Austyn, I've talked too much and you obviously are not Harry Potter, right? Living under the stairs that Dr. Monroe is saying. But can you give a little introduction to yourself so people know who we're talking to here?
Yes, my name is Austyn Jones. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. I am the youngest of six. I have four brothers. I have six siblings.
Wow.
I have four brothers, one sister, but I have not lived with all of my siblings. My first three brothers live with their dad in Albany, Georgia. And my sister was actually living with a foster family my mother knew. And so I've lived with a brother right above me. The brother right above me and myself, we've been living together all our lives. So from Jackson, Mississippi. And then I went to Jackson Public Schools. I was K through 12 Jackson Public Schools. Went to quite a few schools in Jackson Public Schools when I was at elementary school. But I'm a graduate of Murrah High School, the only place to be, Murrah Mustang. And I decided going into college that I wanted to be a teacher. Followed the decision that I made when I was really, really young, that I'd always said that I wanted to be a teacher. For some reason, I was young. I fell in love with being the boss of everybody. And so I just decided, hey, I want to be a teacher to boss people around. But obviously now reasons have changed. And so I decided to become a mathematics educator here at the University of Mississippi. And after I graduate, I'm going to be a teacher here in Mississippi. So it's a little bit
Fantastic. Lucky for us. So, you're talking about your educational past here a little bit. And so that's where we kind of like to start is, could you think about three teachers who you'd like to thank who have shaped your development as a person?
Yes. So three teachers. I would say my first one is my fourth grade teacher. Her name was Miss Hall. She was a tall, skinny, somewhat mean thing, but she was also so nice. She was so nice, though. She was like the pinnacle of when you say warm demander. She was that kind of teacher. Nice. Like she was like, hey, she's like about the business. I've got to get the work, got to get the learning happening. But she was also like so sweet and kind. And she particularly I feel like she took a great interest in me, and she knew that I wanted to be a teacher. Like she knew. I told her in fourth grade I wanted to be a teacher, and so she was constantly kind of making me like the teacher's assistant in class, and nice. She just she positively included me in her class, and I felt like very valued in her class and very valuable in her class. And she was just a nice person. And I actually saw her maybe like in fourth grade, I saw her maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. And I was like, hey, Miss Hall. And she kind of looked at me and she was like, hey, and then looked away and she was like, oh, hey. and so yeah, Miss Hall was one of my teachers. She was fourth grade math teacher. And the second teacher I like to thank is my teacher, Miss Ballard. She was my English teacher in high school. She was actually my English teacher for like 2 years. And Miss Ballard's class was it wasn't just a comfortable place to be. She was so passionate about teaching. I could tell that. She was also another teacher that I told that I wanted to be a teacher. And so she kind of fostered kind of that like little teacher things in me, like, hey, Austyn, here, great, these things for me. Like, here, Austyn, come, like, look at this and let's talk about this for a second. And she was also the kind of, English teacher that, on Twitter, there's like this running meme that English teachers are the teachers that know like the deepest, darkest parts of you for some people. And she did know, she was like probably one of the only teachers in high school that I did share like who Austyn is and aspects of my identity with her, because I was comfortable enough to do that with her. Because she was just like, she like really just made me feel full human in our classroom. It wasn't just about academics, but she was on it with academics. But then also she was also like, hey, I want to know how you're doing as a person, how you are. And then my final teacher is Mr. Ackerman. He was my math teacher in high school. I was like on like a special like kind of honors track in high school. It's called APAC though. And so he was my math teacher for like 3 years. And just thinking about Mr. Ackerman, like, he taught me a lot of math. And his class also, like, he also knew that, hey, Austyn is so capable. Austyn is so intelligent. He knew that of me. So whenever I was like, I'm like a chronic worrier, whenever I worry about my grades or worry about something like, am I going to pass this? He was like, reassuring me like, you're so smart, Austyn, you're so capable. I've known you for like 2.5 years, 3 years now. And, I like owe it to him, even more recent memory. Like, I just recently took like my praxis maybe like a month and a half ago. And, a lot of that math on there is like math I've learned in high school. And so luckily I got my results last week and I passed.
Nice.
So huge thank you to him, just in terms of teaching math and also like just being a great teacher.
Nice. I love the, like, I guess we're seeing a pattern in some of these things. It's not just about the content, right? It's like, even with Mr. Ackerman, like investing all that math in you, but still think about Ms. Hall and think about all the people that they see you beyond just the student, but yeah, the whole person side. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. All 3 teachers you had a relationship with that was deeper than just, that content exchange. It was that, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned that relationship piece, and Dr. Amadon and I have heard a lot about this from other people. It seems to be the same, like you said, repetition of what these teachers mean to people is that they knew me, they saw me, but also that they were serious about the content. It's that combo, which is great.
So, okay. So you decided to take this journey to become a teacher. What were 2 reasons or events that kind of led to that decision?
I think for me, I had always wanted to be a teacher. And it was always like a weird thing because, I'm like a young, like Black male from Jackson, Mississippi. I grew up in poverty, grew up with a single mom. And so it was kind of always weird to like say, okay, I want to be a teacher. Like kindergarten, like I said, when I said I wanted to be a teacher in kindergarten, I just wanted to boss people around. But I stayed on this journey because I noticed that, like, and it's not necessarily a certain event, but then I've noticed that, I really love being like the teacher's assistant. I really love helping my peers. I really love like coaching them. And so like, number one, I've always wanted to be a teacher. Number 2, it was just, I found myself constantly in math classes in particular, like playing the role of the teacher's assistant and the math teacher knowing that, hey, Austyn is capable, Austyn knows this, and Austyn wants to share what he knows with his peers. And so I found myself in the position of always kind of tutoring and like saying, oh, look, Austyn, come help me with this. I know you know it. And things like that. Like, peers would say something like that. And then just also like noticing that in my interactions with my peers when I was like in high school, in particular, when I was, like tutoring them or helping them out with the math problem, like I found myself like kind of like on their STEM identity because it was so much like coming to me like, Austyn, I'm so dumb. I know you know this. You're so smart. And I'm like, wait, no, let's pause right there for a second and like examine that and talk about that because you're not dumb. You're not smart. You just need a little bit more practice. Math is a skill. Math is a sport. You got to practice it. And so like I found myself doing that kind of like naturally, and the teacher caught on that. It's like, Austyn, that was really good right there. You're not just tutoring students and the content, you're coaching them, making them believe in themselves and their abilities. And so like, when my teacher, like Mr. Ackerman, noticed that and said that to me, I guess that is one event that really inspired me. Like, hey, I can be a mathematics teacher. I can foster this productive identity in my classroom. And that's what I want to do. On top of I've always wanted to do it. I just wanted to be a teacher. I didn't know I wanted to teach math, but I knew I wanted to be a teacher. Right.
Nice. That's beautiful. And again, seeing some of the things you saw in the teachers that you thanked initially, seeing that in some of your own, some of your own practices, which you just described. And I'll say it, I saw it from like when we were doing our last class in 353 in the pandemic. I remember I've seen that from the Zoom screen, right? And seeing how you were investing in your teammates, where you'd give feedback on each other's lessons and things. And like that's the kind of teachers we need, that are investing in being able to do the work, but then also as a person beyond. So that's excellent. And
also, Austyn, you use that word coach, which is interesting, because Dr. Amadon and I are reading a book right now, and they talked about teachers as coaches, being a coach, or what was the other?
A conductor.
A conductor or a coach, both roles, it just depends on the personality of the teacher, but both roles are really effective in working with, the student population. And so I think that coach word, it just came out of your mouth. And I think that's a great description of what a teacher does, or effective teacher does.
Mm-hmm.
Really, yeah. All right, Austyn, you ready to place a mile marker on your path to better teaching?
Let's go.
All right. So yeah, this is, teacher's journey. We're on the road to better teaching. So we're going to place that mile marker. So what would be an artifact that you'd use to represent your mile marker?
I think an artifact that I would use to represent my mile marker is actually a T-shirt that I got from.
That's a first for us, a T-shirt. Good. Yes.
Yeah, a T-shirt that we that to wear, like a teacher intern from the Sunflower County Freedom Project and the Mississippi Delta, Sunflower County. And on the shirt was the quote, like, "Freedom has never been free." And it contained pictures of the civil rights activists who got killed in Mississippi, coming to Mississippi, trying to advocate for people's like civil rights and social justice. That got killed. And it was a picture of them on the shirt. And that was the shirt that we first got and received as kind of like to represent the camp and symbolize the work that we're going to do at the camp. On top of like being a camp counselor and teaching things like that, but to contextualize our work at the camp.
So and you just was that this past summer that you just did this?
No, that was the summer of 2019.
Okay. Excellent. Pre-pandemic. That,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why is this mile marker important to your growth as a teacher?
With the SCFP, it was like, it's so hard to encapsulate the full experience of the SCFP in this, very short podcast, but in one word, it was just so transformative, because the work that we did there, first, it was about coming to Mississippi Delta, all right, which historically has been so under-resourced, all right, so stripped of its resources. And there's so high rates of poverty there because of the history there. And so it was so important, because I was coming in from that perspective, like, hey, we're coming in here not to necessarily like change things or save people, but we're coming here to, first of all, grow and develop ourselves, but also invest in a community that needs more investment. And, like in human capital there. And so it was so like important, because like I found myself, like that was the first time, the summer 2019 was the first time that I found myself in an actual teacher role. All right. Like we were fully in charge of classes, us and like college interns. And we were building relationships with students, we literally started the day at 7:00 and we didn't get home till 5:00, because all that time we were spending around students, and we were teaching them academic classes, and we were doing like creative clubs, which is kind of like the art stuff. And we were like doing study hall and morning meetings and things like that. And so it was the role that I got, like, it was, I guess, a fuller picture of what I got at being a teacher, and that at the core of teaching is a good relationship. All right. But also, like, a ton of other skills as well. Like, so I was like learning, how to actually teach content and teach in a way that's, that students can actually pick it up and it's be engaging, things like that. But also realizing that, hey, at every moment at the SCFP, I was building relationships with students and using that, leveraging that when I needed to, be Mr. Jones.
Austyn, I think that's really interesting because you talked about those relationships with those 3 teachers you mentioned earlier and how important that was to you. And you're mentioning it here with your relationship with these students in the Sunflower County Project. But also, like you said, there are other parts to it, but I kind of think of that relationship as sort of like the glue, that the other parts won't stick unless you have that, right? So like the content piece doesn't stick. The little social things you're teaching don't stick unless they have that relationship. So it's like the glue or the thread, if you will, of teaching, that I think that relationship piece really is. The other things will stick, and the other things are really important, but they're not going to stick unless you have that relationship piece.
Mm-hmm. And even something that I had learned at the SCFP is that when you're starting as a teacher, like you need those classroom management skills. You need to know how to handle the classroom and things like that, but that you lean on your relationships to kind of restore and sustain that structure and order in your classroom, right? But leveraging relationships, yeah. SCFP.
Yeah, definitely something you can lean on. That's for sure. So, and this is, I think this might be an all-encompassing one, but so why is this mile marker important to the field? Like why should, the broader teachers, so like we're thinking about this as connecting to standards, our INTAS standards. And I'm wondering which standards you think connect to this mile marker of your development as a teacher.
I would say that definitely learning differences was a big part, because coming to the SCFP, where we're in the heart of Mississippi Delta, we're in Sunflower County, where it's a historically under-resourced community. I think it's very easy for people like that. Like, I didn't have any experience. Like, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, and I was raised, I wasn't raised with the most income, and I was raised by a single mom. All right. And it was even easy for me to come in and thinking that, hey, all these kids are going to be a certain kind of way. All right. They're not going to care about school. They're going to be so low. And so coming in with that deficit mindset, and then misapplying it to all of my students, like all of my Freedom Fellows, we called them. And so I think learning differences was a huge thing, because the students were so unique. They were just as varied and just as diverse as any bunch of students from any community, whether it was under-resourced or whether it wasn't. And so recognizing that, and then catching myself when I begin to think differently than that, that was a huge thing for me at the SCFP, accounting for learning differences, and how students learn, and also how they interact with each other, and then their own individual differences within themselves. And then
can I pause right there for a second, Austyn?
Oh yeah.
I mean, when you talk about the learning differences, and I appreciate the honesty that you're saying, like, I came in with this perspective and I was wrong. And I learned, and I think sometimes we think of mile markers of our development as being always these positive things, but even to say, I had an aha moment and I had to learn, that's awesome. So again, thank you for being transparent there. Keep going though.
And then the second one that I would say why it's important to the field is just the application of content. At the SCFP, we were so big on not just teaching students the content, but fostering their social and emotional growth, and also fostering a social justice oriented mindset. Right. In the math curriculum at the SCFP, there were elements of social justice all throughout the curriculum. So we weren't just teaching math. We were teaching them about, okay, let's talk about poverty and how poverty disproportionately affects you guys here in this region compared to other parts of the state, all right, and parts of the country. And then we also talked about school funding in the math curriculum, and when, connecting that to ratios and proportions. And let's look at the per student spending. Let's look at that, all right, and use that as a way to talk about ratios and proportions and also percentages. And so like we were constantly using math as a way to like examine the world that the Freedom Fellows lived in, like because we actually used data from their county. Like this wasn't just data that just got somewhere else and just, hey, just throw it in their face. Like this is from Sunflower County that we use with them. And let's talk about this and let's like critique this through talking about math, through talking about ratios, through talking about proportions and percentages and unit rates and things like that. And it just made me as a teacher think, hey, like this is what schools should foster, that critical consciousness and making sure that I'm showing my students how math can be relevant to them. All right. Now, can everything in math be, social justice oriented? No, but wherever we could fit it in, we did. And I think it resonated so much with our students at the SCFPR Freedom Fellows.
That's great.
So at the end of this is when we do a resource dump on some stuff. And I can see Dr. Monroe knows that there's going to be a number of things I'm going to hand down.
I've got one in mind. I want to make sure.
I'm ready. This is like my wheelhouse, Austyn. Oh my goodness. But hey, before we get there, because again, this is your episode. So just to give a framework, what is your current pocket size philosophy statement?
It's always so hard for me because I constantly change it. I really changed it like last week. Last week I changed it again.
Right. All right. I mean, that's a good sign. Still refining. All right. It's okay.
He's thinking about it. That's great.
That's
yeah. And I kind of hinted at it when I gave my response about the SCFP, but I just like my pocket size philosophy statement of what I think education should do and what as a teacher I want to do is that I feel like education should build a critical consciousness, like critical consciousness. It should build that. And that's just my short and sweet statement. I can elaborate on it a little bit more. But with the SCFP, one thing we constantly did was we talked about civil rights icons, like the morning meetings. We talked about civil rights icons and we talked about their legacy. We talked about their work. And we kind of used the past and what these people did in the past and the work that they started off in the past and just the past in general to talk about, okay, our present and why our present is set up in such a kind of way and like what inequities exist now and how can we then continue that work that the people did in the past to positively impact our future. And so that was our whole overarching goal at the SCFP is to build and foster a critical consciousness, right? To question the world they live in, to think about why things are the way they are. And so at a global level, it's like, also building that social justice oriented mindset at a global level. And then at a more local level, like in the day-to-day interactions with my students, how this philosophy statement looks like on a day-to-day level. It looks like me fostering their curiosity and like getting them to ask that question, why, and letting them know, hey, that question, like I want to hear you ask the question, why, like, why should we care about this math? Or why is this math done in this way? Or why does this even work? All right. And even just talking about that. And when you're building this critical consciousness, at least like it's seeing students as like co-constructors, I guess, of your classroom environment, because when they start questioning things and you start a teacher like, hey, that's a good point. I don't know why I do it that way. Let's think about another way we can do that. So kind of like just building that critical consciousness, just questioning where we live in, and then like acting on kind of like what we gather from that, and just not accepting things just because they are the way they are, but questioning things. Like that's what I want to foster as a teacher. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I mean, you answered that second part. How we see the influence of this mile marker in your philosophy statement and your journey as a teacher. You nailed that. And I really like just like how you describe, it's almost coming to full circle, like when you're talking about the job of a teacher from the teachers that you thanked, it was more than just, the contract says that they're going to teach this grade and this content, but the job is more than that. And then you're coming back to like even seeing this is like an act of social justice is to be a teacher and to do these things and interact with students and to show them what's possible in the world. I think that's pretty amazing. But Dr. Monroe, did you have anything that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I love this idea, Austyn. You were talking about what was the phrase you used? Social consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or critical consciousness. Yeah,
critical consciousness. Yes, and like how very, very important that is, and it just kind of reflects this idea that, like Joel was saying, we're, as teachers, we talk about, our job is to teach to the standards, but our job is to teach the standards to human beings.
Yes.
And when you're teaching content to human beings, they bring their humanity with them. And there's so much to do with that humanity as a teacher and in the classroom. And that's where all these other things come in. You can't ignore that. You can't really be a great teacher if you're only focusing on the standards and the content. You have to be focusing on the humanity in your room, the human beings in your room, and what it means to be someone who's learning and growing, not only in content, but in every other way. And it's just part of what the job is. And if you really want to be a good teacher, you have to be open and accepting of that responsibility and those other areas of learning that need to take place in the classroom. And I think that was that's to me clearly coming out in what you value and what you see as your role as a teacher. And I think particularly as a teacher in Mississippi, I think there's so much, I think it's important anywhere, but I think there's just so much that we need to make sure that that we talk about in our classrooms, that so much areas for growth and being conscious about things. It's really, really important. So I appreciate that for sure.
All right. Now brace yourself. We're going to give a bunch of resources, and I've got several listed here. And I'm curious though.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, did you ever talk about Bob Moses?
Bob Moses, yes, he was a Mississippi teacher in Jackson, Mississippi. And I forgot, it's the Bob Moses Project. That's what it's called.
The Algebra Project.
Yeah, he recently passed too. Yeah. Like recently, yeah. Oh yeah, I know of him. Yeah.
Yep. So Radical Equations is a book where he talks about the Mississippi Freedom Summer when he went down and registered people to vote and was being threatened with his life. And so thinking about, what he did to try to, facilitate people investing in people in order so that they can invest in their community, right, through the vote. And he later on he equated almost the same action of registering people to vote with like making sure everyone knows algebra, right? And and he saw algebra as a gatekeeper to citizenship. So Radical Equations is a book that he wrote with Charles Cobb Jr. and actually did a podcast with a mathematician, Eris Winger from Gwinnett College. I'm forgetting in Gwinnett, Georgia College in right outside of Atlanta. And we talked about Bob Moses. And so I'm going to post a thing to a podcast, and the book is awesome. And I think any teacher of math in Mississippi or any teacher of math anywhere needs to read that book, but especially in Mississippi, he talks about his experiences. Rethinking Mathematics is from Rethinking Schools, but it talks about a lot of these issues. I wonder if some of these projects and lessons that you talk about that you did over the summer might have been from that book, because they talk about some of these issues and try to use issues in local data in order to make meaning out of mathematics, right? In order to what Gutstein would say is read and write the world. He's one of the editors of the book. I'm using mathematics as a way to read the world in order so I can act on it or write the world. So that, and that's from Frary too, talks about that.
And that sounds like what your students were doing with that data from their community, like that you're putting it into that context where they can sense that that's something they can do with the, with the mathematics.
Right.
And one more book is High School Math Lessons to Explore, Understand, and Respond to Social Injustice. That's by some friends, Robert Berry, John Staley, Basil Conway, and Brian Lawler. And they put that book together, and it's a bunch of lessons from teachers too, but it's one of the most valuable books because it has all the main documents that exist for math ed, and it kind of compacted in here. And then, so it's great mathematics with some great context in order to, again, read and write the world. And that just came out in 2020, and actually had a chance to talk with some of the authors on it. We did a book club on it, but that is an awesome book. And they also are making new books to be for middle school, elementary, and I think even early childhood. So there's either 2 or 3 more books coming out in that series, but that's an awesome book as well. I've got a copy in my office. Of all these things, Austyn, if you want to take a look at it. And Dr. Monroe, did you have anything you wanted to throw out?
Yeah, I think just this is not necessarily math related in particular, but it kind of speaks to that social justice dynamic we were talking about and the importance of making sure students understand what their role is and responsibilities are. And I know for me, this is a resource that I've used over the years, and it's the Southern Poverty Law Centers. Learning for Justice materials and resources. Now, people might know it under the name Teaching Tolerance.
Yep.
But that's kind of they changed the name to Learning for Justice. I think it encompasses more of what they do. But if you go to the Southern Poverty Law Center's website, they have a section for Learning for Justice, and there's all sorts of resources and things that teachers can use in their classrooms, K-12, and just amazing materials that are free for teachers to get those conversations going in the classroom and looking at how you can involve students to be change agents in their own communities and, speaking to that part of the humanity in your classroom and producing good citizens. So that would be the resource. And we'll put links to these in our resources section.
Show notes.
That's what they're called. Show notes.
And great minds think alike. So the teaching or Learning for Justice has also from the Southern Poverty Law Center also has standards, social justice standards. And those social justice standards are referenced in that last book that I mentioned. And they align some of the lessons to not only the standards
what do you know?
math, but the social justice standards. Boom.
That's
there you
awesome.
Go. Yeah. And then in one thing too, you're talking about critical consciousness, Austyn. And that's from there's a book club that Dr. Monroe and I are currently facilitating about the book Dream Keepers by the Dream Keepers by Gloria Ladson Billings. And that's one of the components. She's talking about these excellent teachers of African-American students that she researched back in the 80s? Must have been the 80s, right? Yeah. Late 80s.
Late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, lady. And so, she's a awesome researcher and everything, but like she was looking for what are these components that they had, and one of them of these great teachers, and one of them was this like idea of this critical consciousness. So there you go. That's we've got. I
gotta get in. I gotta get in on that book club.
Yeah.
It's still going. If y'all allow students.
That's right. Well, hey, come by my office, maybe get you something. Anyway, we got a book for you. There you go. So thank you, Dean Rock. All right. Very good. Anything else that we want to say for the good of the order?
I just, awesome to speak to Austyn. I know he's doing great work in a senior practicum right now and be student teaching in the spring. And I believe, Austyn, you're at Oxford High School.
Yes.
Is that correct? Working right now with students. So just wish him the best of luck as he finishes out his senior year and enters the teaching profession. We're excited and thrilled that he's chosen the greatest profession on earth.
Austyn, I think this is the first time we've interviewed is this our first undergraduate? Still in the program.
Maybe so. Maybe it is.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that, but I think it is.
Austyn.
That's excellent. He's still working on this portfolio as we speak.
I know. So
that's awesome.
I'm getting more experience as I go.
No, this is good. This is the whole point of the podcast. This is great. So thank you, Austyn, for doing this. And thank you for tuning into The Teacher's Journey, mile markers on the road to better teaching.
This episode may be over, but the journey to better teaching continues. Please subscribe to the podcast so you're notified when the next episodes are ready to listen to. And if you like what you hear, please rate and review the podcast. You can also share the podcast with someone you feel may be interested in these stories of teacher development.
And are you ready to start your journey to better teaching? Send an email to Nick Sisk. That's Nick F at olemiss.edu. He's a School of Education admissions counselor to hear about all the options like Mississippi Excellence in Teaching Program, all the options for becoming a teacher or educational leader. Perhaps you are well into your journey and looking to further advance as a practitioner or researcher in your field. For more information on all of our graduate programs, contact the University of Mississippi School of Education's Graduate Studies Office by sending an email to gradeducation@olemiss.edu.
Also, follow the University of Mississippi School of Education on social media at Ole Miss Ed School on Twitter and Instagram, so you can learn more about opportunities like free graduate application weekends. Information can be found in the show notes for this episode at roadtobetterteaching.com. And finally, thank you, Austyn, for sharing a portion of your journey with us today.
And thank you to all of you listeners out there for taking the journey to better teaching. This world is a better place because you have used the gifts you have been given to teach others.